Hello there, my name is James, and welcome to Block 42. Block 42 is a super simple 3D design and animation program that allows you to create cool looking creatures, people, or spaceships in minutes, and bring them to life with awesome animation. Today, I'll be showing you how to make a simple cargo-style spaceship, going over some basic functions of Block 42, as well as some explanations of my creative decisions. I'm going to start by choosing a slightly lighter grey for my blocks, rather than pure white, just so they're a bit easier to see, and I'm extending the working area for this from 20 blocks in all dimensions to 40 in both length and width. I've also turned on sloped blocks to get a slightly rounder appearance for this whole project. So I'm starting with a 2x2 column along the entire length of the work area, because I want this to be a fairly long, narrow ship. The idea I have in my head is that we're going to have a transportation block more or less in the middle of the ship, engine blocks at the rear, and a bridge area at the front, all connected by this central span. So I'm working on the engines now, just building them up block by block to see what shapes look good. It's very simple, but with the sloped blocks it looks quite nice, and I'm pushing out what's going to be the engine flame out the back. I'm now pushing out the pylons that the side engines are going to be attached to. We're going to go with 3 engines on this ship, one on each side of the main one. So here I'm going to show you mirroring. Mirroring is an incredibly useful feature that allows us to copy our input from one side of our scene to the other. This allows us to quickly and easily create symmetrical objects. In this case, mirroring across the x-axis means mirroring left to right, and we can see this extra grid appear to show us that we are mirroring. You can also mirror in the y-axis, which is up and down, or the z-axis, which is front to back. So I'm extruding these engine blocks backwards using a tool I'll discuss a little bit more later in order to make them a bit bigger. I'm just moving things forward a bit to give myself a little bit of extra room because I want to make them a little bit more prominent than the central engine, and I'll also add in some modelled flame. And I'm just building the engines up a bit more here, making them look nice and chunky. I'm also building some structure forward here along the central span from the engine block, simply to avoid it looking too perfectly geometrical. Want to keep the design in mind of blocky modules connected by a central span, but we don't want it to be too perfect with it, since that would look a bit boring. So here I am pulling out what will be the central cargo area, and here I'm using the extruder tool to do this. You can find this tool here in the tool panel. Now what this does is essentially pull a surface out in one direction, as you can see here when I pull this surface out sideways and this surface out underneath. You can also use it to push a surface back in, as you'll see me do later. It's a super useful tool, and you should give it a try to quickly and easily create your models. So this is going to be a big blocky section in the center designed to hold all the stuff this ship might be carrying. So here I'm building it up on top a bit more to give it a more interesting shape, but it isn't quite working for me. I try a few different styles before I settle on what I want to use, and this is important. You shouldn't be afraid of trying something out, because if you don't like what it looks like, that's what the undo button is for. Feel free to experiment to see what looks good, what works and what doesn't work, and if you don't like it, you just hit Ctrl Z and you're good to go. I'm now building up a bit of a connection from the cargo block along the span, just to integrate it a bit more into the design, so the transition between the cargo area and the rest of the ship isn't so abrupt. I'm also quickly going back and adding a bit of mass to the engine area, just to balance out the big brick that we've got further forward. I'm now going to start work on the bridge area. I want this to be a fairly small, simple command module with a bit of an under-protruding bridge, sort of like an underbite on the ship, almost. You'll notice that I forgot mirroring here for a while, which would have been quite useful for me here, but oh well. It won't be the last time I make that mistake either. So here I'm carving some detail into the cargo area using the Delete Blocks tool. I've decided to make it look less like one big brick of a cargo container, and more like it's 2 blocks stuck together. Again, just to add a bit of extra detail and break up big flat boring chunks. So what I'm doing here is that I'm flipping back and forth between turning sloped blocks off and on. I want the ship to have a sloped blocks in its final form, so turning that on gives me a better idea of what it will look like at the end of this process, but turning it off helps me spot potential issues, so I have a better idea of what the actual shape looks like, which can help me choose where to place blocks. I forgot to use symmetry here again, but what can you do? So here I am building almost like a roof or a cowl over the neck of the ship here. Again, breaking up the shape so it's not purely square or rectangular absolutely everywhere. This hole I'm making here will also help contrast with that cowl, giving the ship a bit more visual depth and hopefully making it look a bit more interesting. So now I'm just looking around at what I've got, looking at it from all angles to get a good perspective of the whole model. I'm looking to see if there are any boring looking areas that might need more detail. I'm into a little bit of a graphical glitch here, as you can see. I spent a few minutes trying to fix it, and in the end it turns out if you turn sloped blocks on and off, it fixes it right up. So if you run into this, that's what you do. So I'm just looking around, looking for any extra detail I might want to add. I thought about maybe adding these lines as an antenna, but it did not look good at the scale, so I thought maybe not. I'm just jumping back and forth between the various areas, adding a few details here and there. Now that I've bulked up the front, the engines look a little bit weedy, so I decided to make them a bit bulkier and a little bit larger to compensate, as well as making the connecting area a bit thicker and a bit meatier, making it look like it might actually hold the engines that were made here. And just extending the flames a tiny bit. So I'm quite happy with the model here, so let's give it a coat of paint. So I thought it'd be interesting to make this a more industrial type of ship, so I'm going to leave it this sort of off-grey colour, and add a bunch of black and yellow hazard lines everywhere, just to remind everyone who might be on the ship, hey, don't go here. Don't forget that mirroring also affects painting as well, so if you want an asymmetric colouring scheme, you're going to have to keep that in mind. Just adding some black windows for the bridge here. And right now I'm just looking around for where I might be able to add some extra designs and a little bit of colour to break things up. And now I'm going to paint in the flame. I was originally going to go for an orange or yellow flame here, then I thought to make it more of a cyan or blue flame to make it look a bit cooler. So here's a trick to do fire: make it brightest at the base and then gradually darken it towards the tip, that's how flames actually work. I'm going to add a particularly dark extra bit just at the end. This colour is a bit too dark, so I decided to use the manual colour picker to get a darker blue here. Now I'm going to go back to the body and I'm going to start using a darker grey to add some details here. This is the same sort of idea as using the different heights in the model to get extra detail. Here we're just using a different colour to break up the larger flat areas and get a little bit more visual interest, so we're not looking at the same thing all the time. So we want areas that are highlighted, areas that are shaded. The important thing is contrast, which is another way of making things pop a little bit more. And this is a very simple example. You can take this much further if you want, and make things very contrasty and stand out a lot if you want. So I've started to extend the hazard lines on the top here all the way around, but since this is an asymmetric pattern, I've had to redo most of it, but that's fine. Again, I'm just looking around for areas where I can add a little bit more extra detail, a little bit more colour difference, just to make things pop and stand out. As you're going around and adding detail, don't be afraid of pulling out and looking over the entire model at once, get a good overview of what you're doing. It's surprisingly easy to get tunnel vision and just focus on one area before looking back and realizing it doesn't quite fit or you've forgotten something. Taking in the entire piece every so often is a very good idea. So yeah, this has just been a quick little demonstration on creating a cargo spaceship that I thought looked kinda neat. So I'm going to save this file here as cargo ship. I do go back later and rename it to cargo spaceship to avoid any confusion for people who might be looking for an actual boat, perhaps. But there you go. A science fiction cargo spacecraft designed to travel and take stuff from one planet to another across the stars. This was a fairly basic application, but you can take these ideas and take them further if you want. Go on and create your own things. Some of the ideas that I've talked about here, like breaking up big areas with detail in the model, or using colour details to distinguish areas further, trying out different things, going back and forth till you find something that looks good, all of these can help you designing your own spaceships, or people, or monsters, or buildings, or anything you want. This has been Block 42. It's super simple and free to try. Feel free to go ahead and try it out. Good luck and have fun!